Hi, I'm Cindi Madsen. I'm here for Romance Author StoryTime, reading an excerpt of my book, A Cowboy Never Quits, which is about a at-risk youth ranch and the Dawsons who run it, so Wade Dawson, and then Jess, whose teen daughter is going there, and she takes a job as a cook, even though she doesn't exactly cook, which is why she has picked up food from the diner, but is trying to keep that a secret, only then she ends up stuck in the mud, so Wade is helping her out. He didn't know how literally she'd meant just a second, so he made his way over and she quickly slammed the trunk. She leaned her hip and elbow against it as if she had a body in there and gave him a big fake smile. "Everything okay?" he asked. "Yeah, it's just peachy. This is what I do for fun." To each their own. Wade squatted to check out the tires. They were buried deep in the muck, no chance of simply hopping in the car and easily driving out. Once this mess dried, these ruts were going to make their little dirt road even bumpier than usual. "I'll get the chain from the truck and hook it to the front bumper." "Okay, I suppose I should come see how it all works in case I get stuck again. Or you could take the truck next time." It had popped out without thinking, and he worked to soften his words. "Is my suggestion, not an order or anything." After he turned the truck around and showed her how to connect everything, he grabbed a couple of planks of wood. "Okay, climb in the truck and throw it in first while I push the car from behind." Instead of climbing into the truck, she simply blinked at him. It didn't seem like her usual stubbornness, but maybe he hadn't said the right combination of words. "Please?" Jess opened her mouth, closed it. Then she spun on her heel and climbed inside the cab. She killed the engine 3 times in a row before bailing out, and suddenly he knew why she hadn't taken the truck. "When you said you could drive a stick shift, I said it had been a while, which is true. But I only tried it out one time, and I sort of wrecked, so..." She lifted her thumbnail as if she were going to bite it, rethought it once she got a look at her muddy hands, and swiped her palms together. "I don't know how to drive one. There, are you happy?" "Not the word I'd use to describe myself right now." Wade stepped closer and dipped his head, his eyes seeking out hers. "You could have just told me." "Let's cut to the point and say that I'm bad at a lot of things. One of them that I really care about, and it's why my daughter is here now." "Jessica," she shook her head. "Can we please just get my car out and move on with our day?" The tremble in her voice made him feel like an ass. Maybe Brady was right, and he wasn't the best at allowing for mistakes. Probably due to a combination of being ridiculously busy, forever overworked, and stressed out to the point he couldn't remember what it felt like not to have worries in the back of his mind. But that was no excuse to make the people closest to him, or Jessica, feel bad. He instructed her to get in the car and hit the gas while he pushed so he could get the car onto the boards. He almost told her that she was damn good at getting stuck, but he liked to think he occasionally knew when to keep his mouth shut. Good thing he had it shut right now, because as Jessica hit the gas and the wheels spun, mud splattered up his chest and sprayed his face. Jessica gave a celebratory shout as she climbed out of the car. As frustrating as Wade was, he'd managed to get the car out of the bog. She tried to suck up her pride and thank him, but those words died on her lips as she took him in. A stripe of mud ran up his chest, and he had splatters on his face and ever-present cowboy hat. A laugh burst out of her, and he cocked his head and gave her an "oh, really" look. "Thank you, and I'm sorry, but..." She laughed again. Wade squatted down. She assumed to do something with the car, but the next thing she knew, he'd popped up and hurled a glob of mud at her. It hit her square in the chest, and her jaw dropped. "Oh, it's on, Wade Dawson." "Bring it, Jessica." She filled her hands with the thick sludge, and when he drove around to the other side of the car for cover, she slid across the hood, hit the soggy ground on the other side, and threw for all she was worth. The mud ball smashed into his shoulder as he brought it up to block, drops hitting his neck and ear. "Where'd you learn the slide across the hood move?" "Getaway driving." "Not a stick shift vehicle, obviously." "Obviously." Wade stalked forward. "But that leaves me no choice but to play dirty." She backpedaled, her arms out in front of her. "I think we're both dirty enough." He lunged, and she let out a high-pitched squeal she wasn't proud of, but there it was anyway. Her feet slipped as she turned to run, and she was going down, before he even got a hold of her, too, dang it. Mud squished between her fingers in the grossest of ways. Come to think of it, with all the cows and horses, there was undoubtedly a fair amount of manure mixed in. She rolled onto her butt and peered up at Wade's smug expression. "This doesn't mean you win. If anything, gravity does." He laughed and extended a hand. She clamped on, let him pull her halfway up, and then jerked, throwing her weight back. Her butt hit the ground, hard for as squishy as it was, but it was worth it when Wade tumbled down with her. She flung mud as she scrambled away, but he caught her foot and dragged her to him. Then she was on her back, and he was over her, his palms braced on either side of her head. They were both filthy, and she knew she should care, but it only made her get the giggles all over again. She brought up one knee and pushed to sit, using her palms right as he shifted forward, causing their hips to bump together. His gaze dipped to her mouth, and her giggles died in her throat. Her mind did a quick 180, thinking back to when she'd first mentioned driving a stick shift. She joked it had been a long time, long enough she worried she'd forgotten how, and she hadn't been talking about a truck. It had been so long since she'd even been this close to a man, and sure, this one pissed her off sometimes. But then he'd say something funny, or he'd give her a look, and her heart beat faster. They were already filthy, and her body whispered that it was on board with exploring all meanings of the word. Her breasts came out labored, and she noticed his were just as ragged. Did he move closer? Did she? Did it matter? The trill of his cell phone cut through the air, and it took her brain a few seconds to realize it wasn't hers. Luckily, hers was in the console of the car, because she doubted it would handle the mud. Wade wiped his hands off on one tiny section of his shirt that wasn't dirty and answered. Disappointment flooded her as she scooted out from under him, even as she told herself it was for the best. She was already on thin ice, and she'd probably only imagined he was thinking of kissing her. She drove him at least as crazy as he drove her. Yeah, I'll call him. Wade's gray eyes tracked her as she stood, and her knees wobbled slightly. I'll be back in a few. He disconnected the call and slowly slid his phone back in his shirt pocket. Surprised your phone still works. Life-proof case. I was skeptical, but... From mud fights to discussions of phone cases. Super hot move, Jessica. But again, she wasn't trying to make a move. She'd rev it only to kill the engine, just as she'd done with the truck. Too much gas or not enough, and speaking of rusty... Ew, that makes it sound like my... Ew, not going there. Just like no one else has gone there in a long, long time. Jess cleared her throat. Anyway, so can I just drive off, Or, he said, moving closer, and her pulse leaped. I've still got to hop in the truck and pull you the rest of the way out. I'm thinking I'll tow the tin can all the way home just to be safe. She smacked his arm. Hey, my tin can has taken me a lot of places. Currently, it also had bags of food scattered across the floor of the trunk. She wanted to right the containers and assess the damage, but she'd had to slam the lid to avoid being caught. Putting her poker face in place so her guilty thoughts wouldn't show, she shifted her weight from her right leg to her left. I'm guessing that call means you're more behind at work. He nodded, but didn't add a verbal jab like she'd expected. She wasn't sure what to do with this guy. 1 minute, he'd be so surly she'd have to resist strangling him, and the next he was initiating mud fights and teasing her, his mouth temptingly close to hers. One thing was for sure, she could get into so much trouble with this cowboy. Well then, guess we better head back. He caught her hand and gave it a light squeeze, and before she could even process the sweet gesture, he moved to the truck. He opened the door and peered inside. Guess there's no point in trying to keep it clean now. I'll clean it, since it was my fault. He shrugged, whatever that meant, and ushered her into the truck. Spots of mud were still squishy while the other places were drying, and it was uncomfortable to say the least. The truck lurched, its wheels spinning in the mud for a second before digging in and sending them forward. The beauty of four-wheel drive and giant tires. Even in the bigger vehicle, they slid and bumped their way back to the ranch. Just as she was about to thank him, he glanced in the rearview mirror. Thinking they must have company, she swiveled around to see what had caught his attention. Unfortunately, her brain was on a delay from everything that had happened, and Wade was already bailing out of the truck. The words, "Your trunk," popped open again, trailing behind him. "No!" she screamed, reaching for the door handle to jump out and race him there. Her stupid seatbelt snapped her back. She unlatched it, her heart rate screeching into the danger zone as she scrambled out of the truck. She knew she was too late, but desperately trying not to be anyway. Wade peered over the top of the trunk at her, an expression she couldn't read. "Why, Jessica Cook, looks like you have some explaining to do." So, again, that was from A Cowboy Never Quits. My book's now available in paperback, Kindle, audio, whichever way you want to read it. Listen to it, and if you have any questions, just pop them in the comments, and I will answer them. Thank you.